The Dane and Derek Show is an uncensored, unfiltered podcast. Content warnings can be found in the episode description. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Dane and Derek Show, a weekly podcast where two nerdy friends keep in touch and shoot the shit. My name is Benig-Aiello, a writer, director, and avid tabletop RPG player, and with me, as always, is my good friend Dane Fogdahl.
Hey, I'm Dane. I'm a writer and creator, and lover of tabletop RPGs.
Yeah. So, Dane, this icebreaker is going to inform the topic. So I'll just get right to it. Calvin or Hobbes?
Hobbes, easy.
Oh man, yeah, I was gonna say Hobbes as well. Okay, cool. We're both Hobbes. Yeah. Okay, great.
Yep.
Okay, moving on.
He's a sentient tiger with like a wicked sense of humor.
Yeah.
I don't know how do you
exactly.
beat that? That's so cool.
You really can't. I mean, sure, Calvin's got a great shirt, but Hobbes is a sentient tiger who is not Tigger. Both are great. I mean, let's be that a sentient tiger that either has a sense of humor or can bounce real high. Both are great.
A sapient tiger, period. Just tiger person, I'm in. I'm in. One of my very first D&D characters was a were-tiger, actually.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, were-tiger monk?
Yeah.
Good stuff.
Anyways, yeah, this week's topic is Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah, if you hadn't guessed by the intro.
Which is fun. So I'm going to just real quick ask what is your experience with this honestly seminal comic strip?
I'm pretty sure you were the first person that showed me Calvin and Hobbes.
I believe that. I sincerely believe that.
Because you would always have whether it's images on your phone or that you had a paper bound or a hardcover, or maybe you had both. You had a hard copy of it that you used to carry around all the time.
Yeah, I had a particular strip and I've lost it, so I don't even fully remember which one it was that I would carry around. And I have nearly all of it. I've never been in a place where I could afford to get the hardback definitive collection, but I have most of them in one form or another. Yeah. So what are your feelings about it?
I feel like it is one of those comics that when you read it, you feel a little bit more okay. Like it really validates the emotions you're feeling when you read it.
Yeah.
And in a way that a lot of comics that are in the newspaper or just in general they just don't make me feel. And the thing is, Calvin and Hobbes is they're 5 panels, 3 panels. They're so concise. I remember this great interview with Freddie Wong. I always got to mention Freddie Wong, but he was talking about how the YouTube videos they make, they specifically studied Ben Watterson's the way that he told stories through Calvin and Hobbes, because at the time, a perfect YouTube video, they compared it to a 3-panel comic, and sort of following that same structure that Calvin and Hobbes has, where there's a setup, a dilemma, and then a wrap up, and it's hilarious, right?
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many things have that kind of structure, or just how many beats you can kind of get on a technical level. But that's the thing, right? On a technical, on a narrative, and on an emotional level, Calvin and Hobbes is superb to most other comics.
It is, and it's also not cynical. Is one thing that's I think is really important about it. I would say that Peanuts, especially the early Peanuts, is not terribly cynical. I would also say that a comic, I don't know if you've heard of this one, Bloom County, also kind of falls in that realm. Bloom County was weirdly mature and political. It doesn't land with kids. And anyways, so whereas Garfield is really cynical, or Dilbert is pretty cynical. And so, like, which is funny because Calvin also hates Mondays, but there's like a weird life and joy to the way he hates Mondays in the way that Garfield doesn't. Anyways, so I'll talk real quick about what Calvin and Hobbes means to me. Calvin and Hobbes is up there with Star Wars for me as far as like foundational parts of my childhood. When I was 8, I spent months saving up every little quarter and dime I could to have $10 to buy a tiger stuffed animal from the zoo, to have my own Hobbes. Like, this is like deep, deep, deep important to me. Stories. And the wonderful thing is that, honestly, in some ways more than Star Wars up until kind of recently, has actually grown up with me. Upon rereading, I get more than I did before. But what I got as a kid isn't invalidated. What I got as a kid was wild imagination and somebody out there actively telling me it was fantastic and better and special to have this wild imagination, you know. So wildly important to me, and I read them and reread them and, you know, collected them, and like they were with me in like sickness and health, like literally. Like, I had to throw out one of my books when I was little, and it was heartbreaking because I was up late feeling sick and I threw up on it. Like, that's like, it's always there for me, honestly. So yeah, and there are reasons for all of this. And I think there's one big reason that I think may end up being like kind of what we end up talking about most in this episode. Calvin and Hobbes is aggressively, distinctly art.
Yeah.
Like, Bill Watterson made Calvin and Hobbes art, like capital A art, in a way that most comic strips don't. And honestly, in a way most things today don't. And I think, especially in pop culture, and I think that's incredible. And, you know, like, we'll get into that in just a second, but like, that fact alone, I think, makes it magical, right? Like, the Peanuts sell insurance, right? Like,
Yeah.
MetLife does Peanuts. There are Peanuts movies and specials. I actually really love the specials, so I don't really want to rag on them. But like, I couldn't go get an official licensed Hobbs TM doll.
Right.
Like, I couldn't do
Right.
that. Nobody can do that. That doesn't exist. Basically, the only thing that exists are the books, the collections. I looked it up beforehand, and let me see if I can. Yes. So like, there are here's a basic list of the legitimate Calvin and Hobbes merchandise. 2 16-month calendars of 1988 to 89 and 1989 to 90. A T-shirt from the Smithsonian exhibit. A textbook of teaching with Calvin and Hobbes. And a series of U.S. postal stamps, and then they have appeared in various academic works and Great American Comics 100 Years of Cartoon Art. That's it, which is so wild. And if you go to Wikipedia, you can see that list. And apparently the estimated price of licensing revenue foregone by Bill Watterson is $300 to $400 million.
Oh my goodness.
Yes. And he gave this up. He passed on this because he felt like it would cheapen his artwork.
That's some integrity.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, it's probably the most integrity of any artist.
Yeah,
Like,
and for listeners, I'll just real quick give a quick like rundown of what Calvin and Hobbes is. It's about a kid who has a stuffed tiger that when no one else is around comes to life. And each of the characters are named after historical figures. So Hobbes is named for Thomas Hobbes, who's best known for his weighty treatise of Leviathan, I believe. And Calvin is for John Calvin, who was a Protestant theologian. And so basically, the thing is that this strip is about the joys of childhood, but also the characters represent philosophy. And the strips can oscillate from like, him playing like kids games to them having discussions about like literally about death sometimes, to a lot of it. The comics, of course, are those standard like 3 to 5 panel, like just, little boxes. But also his Sunday strips, like Bill Watterson literally pushed the boundaries of what those could be. Like he would do like panelless ones. He'd do these like crazy Sunday strips that were kind of like you could like frame basically. And so the strip ran from 1985 to 1995. And one of the crazy things is, in the same vein, we've talked about this before with like, Cowboy Bebop, for example, of like things that ended like right when they should have. This is another one of them. It ran for 10 years and then it was done. The Peanuts ran from like the 40s to the 90s, basically. Most comic strips don't end. They end when their creators retire, or like more often when they die, and sometimes they're picked up by their kids. Watterson had the most popular comic, period, in America at the time. And he just walked away because he said he was done. He had done everything he wanted to do with the comic. And during that whole process, he fought for having creative control. Basically, the way the comics industry works, you wouldn't fully be in control of your IP. So he legally fought everyone, and because the strip was so good, he could renegotiate the contract because the option was to not have it in the paper, and that was literally a problem for papers.
Right.
And so, yeah, he ended the strip. He took sabbaticals. It was his art. It is his art. And nobody can take that away from him. It stands on its own because he forced it to. And in a medium that is so often considered cheap and disposable and worthless. So I don't know. What do you think of that? Like as like an artist yourself,
I mean, I think
going
it's
up,
really,
yeah,
it's
you
really
go.
admirable. It's really admirable to to draw your line in the sand and to know. I think the like, I don't know, like I think it's more complex than like, oh yeah, Bill Watterson didn't sell out, right? Like I think it's more complex than just that, right? Like I don't think it was just a matter of selling out versus keeping it independent. There was a bigger philosophy as to why, and it's like that to me, just having that much integrity to stand by the work you've made is like, that's pretty incredible. It's pretty hard because like, I'm sure he took a lot of criticism in his time. I'm sure he, got told off by a lot of people for turning down this stuff, but it's just like,
Yeah. Would you like to hear the list of people he never returned the calls for making films based on Calvin and Hobbes?
sure.
Including Jem Henson, George Lucas, and Steven Spielberg. None were returned.
Yeah, see, that's like, that's insane, right? Like,
Right.
it's, but at the same time, like, is it? Like, and I think that that's like so interesting, right? Because like he pushed the medium, he pushed the storytelling, and he ended it on his own accord. And like, I think that that's a valuable lesson to, to remember. Like not everyone's going to have a Calvin and Hobbes, but everybody can learn from the fact that as an artist, you have to know when it's time to end something, or when you should or shouldn't do something. Like, I don't know, like, it's an awful example, but like our podcast, we don't run ads on it
Mm-mm.
because that would jeopardize the integrity of what this podcast exists to do, right?
Right. Honestly, it'd feel a little weird.
It would, yeah. It would feel very weird, and it wouldn't be genuine to why we do this and to why people listen to this podcast. And like, even if we were to like get a sponsor, I feel like we would say no. And
Yeah.
yeah, and it's like one of those things where it's like, that's because like in our hearts we know that the integrity of the show and the trust we have with our audience is more important than any amount of money, big or small, we could be paid. And I think like in the case of Bill Watterson, it's the stakes are, you know, Shakespearean proportions. They're huge, right?
Yeah.
Like $300 to $400 million he walked away from, right? Like,
Yep.
and I think that it's a statement. It's a statement to how capitalism can twist art, right? And how it can twist art into sort of just a marketing material. Like so much of like the stuff we watch today is just product placement, and that can be really hard to kind of absorb. Like, I used to be really plugged into like tech YouTube, and there's nothing wrong with being a tech gadget enthusiast, but at the end of the day, like every single tech YouTuber is trying to sell you whatever phone they're reviewing, or whatever laptop or speaker or microphone or cable, right? And there's something there that I don't quite know how to articulate it, but it doesn't sit well with me. To know that at most turns I'm being sold something. And like, I don't blame them, right? They got to make a living, right? They got to make a living doing their hobby, doing their passion, doing their art. Like, that's fine.
Yeah.
Do what you got to do. But at the same time, like, it's a little bit, there's a line there that's so, yeah.
Something has been undermined. Something has been changed.
Yeah.
Right.
So yeah, it's like a gray area. It's a foggy area that I can't quite see through. And I feel like when you have the ability to walk away, like, man.
Yeah. And it's definitely a thing of like, that example is really tough because like the heart of like the tech review YouTube is product placement. Like,
yeah,
it is the thing.
Exactly.
I think maybe another like example could be like Star Wars, right? Or the MCU. Like,
yeah.
These things, like, yes, they definitely want you to watch, and yes, it is definitely better if what's being made is good. But that's not where Disney's making its money now, is it?
Right.
And so like, yeah, I don't think in those cases, like, I don't know anymore. Like, there was a period where I guess Star Wars could have walked away, but that's that universe is long gone. And
Yeah.
like, Marvel, it's always weird because it's like superheroes started out to sell things to kids. Like that's what they were. Um, and they've grown into something more, but they're still tied to this thing. It's odd. Um, but this is inherent to them, and I don't think that it's a problem that they're selling you something, but it does mean that two things are happening, right? Calvin and Hobbes is never selling you a Hobbes plush doll. It just isn't. You know?
Right.
And I think there's definitely some magic in that for sure.
Yeah, it's almost like, because it's not, it's like a TV show that ends. I mean, it's like anything that ends when it was on top, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's like you're never, because it's not so prevalent every day, or like just being shoved at you in like an ad or in a store where it's a dime a dozen. It feels so much more valuable and important because
Yeah.
it only really exists in these very limited forms. Like, it's like the equivalent of listening to like Beethoven back in the like, whenever Beethoven was composing, right? like
Mm-hmm.
like we'll never hear the way that it sounded back then now. And
No.
that I think is sort of the, that's probably a better analogy, maybe. I don't know.
I think it has to do with the fact that it exists only in its medium,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Like, you can't go anywhere and not see Iron Man, right?
Yeah.
But you will go weeks, months without seeing Calvin and Hobbes. You
Mm-hmm.
will go weeks, months not seeing something from Cowboy Bebop, or you have to seek it out as it is, right?
Yeah.
It does not exist in merchandise. Your enjoyment of it only exists in the interaction between the art and the person like interacting with the art, right?
Right.
And I think it's wild that he managed that in a medium that does not support that, right?
Yeah.
Like, comics in the newspaper do not support that.
Right.
I don't really think Hollywood big budget film supports that. I don't think almost any video games that, big budget video games don't support that. Like, he took what most people would consider a low art and made it fine art. Like,
Yeah.
a painting is a painting. You see a Van Gogh, it's just a Van Gogh. Like,
Yeah.
it's not. And I think that's kind of what's spectacular about it.
Yeah.
And I mean, like, I could go on for ages and ages about why I love it so much. Like, I would wager that, you and I sometimes talk about the fact that often what I do in my writing is have characters just sort of have conversations about things. And especially it kind of like will lend itself towards like philosophy and this sorts of stuff. And well, I wonder where I got that from, because that's what Calvin and Hobbes is. The core of
Yeah.
the comic is Calvin and Hobbes talking,
Right.
And so, yeah, I think it's really beautiful. And I think anyone who's listening who hasn't spent any time with these comics, I say you should. I would encourage you to spend a little more time with them if you get the chance. Not that that's super easy. You'll have to get a
Yeah.
book.
Yeah. I was just like, looking around my room at like sort of all the posters I have up of things that I love, and I was like thinking like what's something else that did what Bill Watterson did in a way. And Bastion from Supergiant Games,
Yeah, that's pretty fair.
and Transistor as well. Like, there's something about like the finite it of its of his the fact that it exists pretty much as just a video game, and that like what and that like even though like yeah, sure there might be some like posters or like limited things, but like Supergiant Games like controls all of that and they hold it to that standard. Maybe it's the standard, right? It's like Bill Watterson held his art to his standard and no one else's.
Right. And I think his standard was just quite honestly so extreme.
Yeah.
It was so extreme with like one thing, like we both love the Supergiant Games. And Hades of all of them is much more popular than the last few.
Yeah.
Like, but the thing is, they're not. The thing about Bill Watterson is that Calvin and Hobbes is the Star Wars of like Saturday morning, Sunday morning newspaper comics. But he didn't do the George Lucas thing and then do a million action figures, right?
Exactly, yeah. Or a prequel.
Yeah, no, like that's the thing. Is that not only did he hold himself to this standard that lots of other artists do, honestly, or close, or to their own varied standard. He did it when like you said, the stakes behind it, the temptation was as great as it possibly could have been,
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think it stands out, and I think it's a good reminder, right? Like, I think it's a good reminder to remember that when you make something, it is yours, and what happens with it should be your decision. And that there is a lot of value in a work as it is,
Yeah. 100%. Yeah.
But we are at time.
We are. Man. Like all good things, so must this episode end.
Yes. Yes, it should. It's gotta.
Yeah. Well, folks, you can see what movies I'm watching on Letterboxd at Benig-Aiello. And Dane, I hope at this point your Substacks sending stuff, but where can we find you and your work?
You can find me at danewrites.com. There's links to my writing through the Substack. If I haven't done it by now, I'm in trouble. Something's happened where I'm really behind in life. But also my podcast, Isology, my music, and my Twitter. Yeah. Well, I really enjoyed this episode. It got way more like intense and serious.
It really did.
Expected, but like I feel like wholesome about it. I don't know if you feel that way.
No, like you said, it's a really good reminder of just like the integrity that we hold ourselves to with the things we create, and how we do have the power to. It's a good reminder that we do have the power to do what we will with our art. Which, going back to your Substack pitch idea, you're about to embark on your very own, like, however frequent thing, like writing thing, like a Calvin and Hobbes.
Yeah, kinda.
That's pretty exciting. It's all kind of coming full circle.
It's all coming together.
I cannot express how excited I am because I don't know. There's something really beautiful in creating something so finite like that, and so frequent and updating consistently, right? Like there's something. There's something that you do. There's something different to that than making a movie once every 2 years, right? Like it's a mood.
Yeah, it definitely is.
Yeah. Well, we've rambled on long enough. I guess we'll skedaddle on out of here.
Oh, it returns. The skedaddle returns.
The skedaddle returns. I don't know if we'll ever let that go.
I don't think so. It's over.
It's over. All right. Bye, everybody.
Catch you later.